You're listening to the Phatcast live from the studio with Colin Reynolds. Good afternoon. You're watching the Phatcast. My name is Colin Reynolds, and today my special guest is Mr. Konrad Park, aka Stickrad.
That's a WA, mate.
Ah,
That was pretty short, actually.
pretty sure. Indeed. So now the name Stickrad, obviously, Rad Konrad, Stick, the Chapman Stick, all sorts of sticks, but the Chapman Stick is certainly how I know of it. Tony Levin, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. What an incredible instrument.
Yeah. It's wild, no doubt. I think there's now somewhat 6,000 players, 6,000 plus globally, and you've got, like an instrument you'd expect, you've got people playing all sorts of music on it. Like there's a chap in Spain plays Domenico Scarlatti on it. There's Bob Culbertson can play, who we've brought out. Justin and I brought out Bob's 3 times since 2007, and he can play J.S. Bach, Toccata and Fugue in D minor, or he can play Hendrix, And my thing is really more about getting into my classical music preferences meets sci-fi meets improvised music and
meets the love of film and soundtracks. Yeah.
Like Jerry Goldsmith's chain smoking at a session for Planet of the Apes or something, meets some kind of new sound design and melody. And
I seem to recall not the last time you played Stickrad, but before that, was it some kind of noir? Was it Nordic noir or something?
Nordic noir, yeah, that's what I call. I've been watching too many of those crime docos, because there's so much great music written for film and for Netflix and all these other great shows now. Yeah,
definitely.
And it's I'm always really tuning in heavily onto the soundtracks to a ridiculous degree.
Yeah.
My whole thing around soundtracks, it's pretty curious. It's a really, really good story to tell because everybody in Australia had 2 double albums in their record collection in 1978, and that was Star Wars and Saturday Night Fever, right? So I had to convince Dad and Mum that $12.99 wasn't too much to spend on one double album in 78.
Yep.
Are you sure you want to spend that much money? And Dad's got 400 vinyl albums.
Of course he does.
Right? And Mum's loves music and can listen to jazz and no problem. And I was like, yep, I want it. So fine. And then I just played it over and over and over. And for me, it's always been a case of the plot line of the Wagnerian sci-fi symphony, which was what John Williams created. That's what they refer to it now.
That was interesting that you refer to it as Wagnerian. We'll touch on that in a minute. Put a pin in that.
Right. Yeah, because I love those films so much. The actual plot line of the soundtrack helped me to revisit the film in my head.
Sure.
So it's just this kind of pre-internet power of the imagination of just having the music be so filmic naturally, but it's that filmic nature has just really influenced really a big part of my music. Yeah.
Well, the soundtracks particularly, so they've got these key moments where you essentially in an entire theme you might actually only hear the head or that main melody fully one time in the center of the song, but it builds up towards that moment. And the example I'm thinking of is from that album we're talking about, written by John Williams, the Force theme. Force theme, which is the music that is playing as Luke's there looking up at the Tatooine Tucson sky. Right? That's the Force theme. And we hear that in various spots in the saga. But that's where we first hear that melody come to fruition.
Right.
And
it's very romantic, big moment.
Well, you can't hear that now without thinking about where it came from.
Oh, yeah. So the other thing, with those amazing movies, the whole 70s musical culture was just a crazy landscape, right? Not just the classical side of the soundtrack side of it, but for me, being able to grow up around the great New York jazz and rock scene, jazz, rock and improvised music, all the great groove players. So you imagine as a young drummer how I started playing drums when the Steve Gadd, Harvey Mason, Michael Brecker, their stars were just ascending. They were like young men, right? Yep. So I'm just, the timing is just insane, and I always refer to that at teach time and tell students about how amazing it was to be able to think of that, be aware of all those musicians growing and really, really just taking off, and how they've been such really important musicians in terms of their contribution to contemporary music. And then, Marcus Miller, a few years later, he was coming through, and Simon Patterson and I freaking out saying, listen to that slap style. How does he do that? And everyone knows how Marcus does that now. But those things were just such quantum leaps, and we were in it. It was happening to us as much as they were giving it out. So back to the soundtracks, and Dad would not let me go and see Alien, right? I wanted to go and see Alien, something chronic, and he'd seen grown men walking out of the cinema shaking. And the stories about in the States when the people when they were watching it for the first time, the audience is slowly moving further back to the back of the room, away from the screen, and everyone's going, what's going on? They're just freaking out because you think of it, they hadn't seen anything that scary and that lucid and Giga and everything,
That movie, that's a movie I know really well. Really well. Yeah. Love that movie.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's the greatest horror movie ever written.
Right.
And sure, it's sci-fi or whatever, it's still horror.
Ash is a goddamn robot.
Right. Oh, yeah. Ian Holm, what a great character. Anyway, so just as you were talking about, like, people should, the thing is with Alien, 90% more. It's not about showing the alien.
Yeah.
It's they create this sense of dread.
Yeah.
You don't even get your first glimpse of the alien until you're halfway in. Tom Skerritt's down, scurrying around in the bloody tunnels, and then beep, 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 you see half a second of that's it.
Yeah.
And then you don't see him again till the the cat. And then
what about the people were running out and just going to the toilets and spewing and they were going up to the box office saying, "How dare you do this to me?" It was just amazing.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine this? This hand-picked group of obviously very resolved, stern staff people. Can you imagine how they would react to seeing some of the stuff we see today?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel dirty even mentioning it, but like, the human fucking centipede.
Oh yeah.
Oh Jesus Christ! Like,
yeah.
There's terrible, terrible stuff out there.
Yeah. Right. Crazy. And then so what I could do was Dad would let me buy the Alien soundtrack.
Yep.
Right. So I go out to bloody Eastlands, Wastelands in 79 or whatever, and I go to this small music shop and just I say, can you put this on? And just the cover, that really minimalist primal weird cover. And then I'm listening to this music, and there's such amazing balances to that music. It's brutal. It's so refined and romantic. Jerry Goldsmith is big on the romance of the spacious, the open sort of the romance of the elements of the visual side of space, but then there's these themes coming through Jerry Goldsmith. Russell was telling me at composition at Utah's that Jerry's such an incredible colorist. It's not like there's necessarily complex themes, but he's such an amazing sound organizer. So there was just these incredibly mysterious and really powerful music that was really invoking a sense of this world that I wasn't allowed to see. And I think moments like that are really key. I think somehow musicians really just need to have their imagination seeded in a way.
It's funny, how restrictions breed creativity.
Yeah.
And in the same way, your father, by making a taboo, has actually imbued the works with a sense of mystery they wouldn't previously have had for you.
Yeah.
And that's only got to have encouraged your interest.
Big time. I mean, Gary Husband is one of my great drum heroes, and I consider myself now like pretty much a stick is like a piano, really. That's how I see it. And Gary Husband's a drum playing piano player. Like Virgil Donati's a drum playing piano player, and that's where I'm going. And yeah, Gary Husband, he'd say the drummers need to just listen to music that's got nothing to do with drums, and just to sit down and turn the lights off and listen to Mahler or some great orchestral works.
Wow.
Because then there's those layers in those symphonies or whatever that, there are just so many layers of emotional intelligence and sound design, functional harmony, all these things. There's so many ways that you can come at it.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a grammar or an understanding that you get. I mean, Paul Keating used to sit around and listen
He's a big music
listen
lover,
to
Paul
Mahler,
Keating.
right? Because he said the plot line of a symphony would help him contextualise a day in the office, like as a politician. I thought that was amazing. I love that sort of stuff,
Actually, only last week, watched a 2-hour interview with Paul Keating. So, quite a character, Paul.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, like at the time, just straying into politics, at the time...
Alien, stick, politics,
reliving 80s and 90s here. So Keating, he did a lot of remarkable things for Australia. At the time, I didn't have the greatest political understanding, and let's be honest, probably still don't. I was interested in it for a few years, but dropped off when everything sort of started getting hectic. Anyway, so Keating, where was I even going with this? He talks at length about his love of music. To get back onto the music away from the politics.
But he's a great orator as well.
Certainly.
So like Obama's an orator.
He criticised... Keating's the first to criticise the timbre of his own voice.
Wow.
Yeah. He's saying what you need in politics, other than the strategy, the wit and the resolve, is you need a bloody loud voice.
And we don't like to talk at all, do we?
Well, I mean... Imagine how hard politics would be if you got not so much of a loud voice. And he, in his own estimation, he thinks of his voice as weak. But so just to come back to that pin, Wagnerian.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so temp music, something that when you're making a film, some directors use, and they'll get just like a couple of pieces of music that's kind of in the style of what they kind of want written for the music. Yeah. I mean for the film. Anyway, Wagner, some of his music was used as temp music in Star Wars, and
at the end of Alien had some other temp music come in.
Probably. So, like for example, in Star Wars, you have like for example when you see the scene of the Death Star for the first time.
Yeah.
There's a piece of music. I don't think it's Wagner. It's some other German composer. The work is called The Planets, anyway, and it's about the planets, not as in the planets necessarily planets with like the Greek gods,
like Holst, the planets, Gustav Holst, the planet.
Yes, Gustav Holst. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So Mars, the god of war, and like you said, it's like dun 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 dun. So this music's that was in there for. George Lucas has picked that out and said to John Williams, this is I want something like this. Right now, that all worked lovely, and obviously Williams wrote quite an unforgettable score. Now, in another movie that Williams wrote the score for, it didn't end up getting used because Stanley Kubrick, I think it was John Williams. Stanley Kubrick has used temp music for 2001: Space Odyssey. The composer, who I think was John Williams, has kind of written the score according to the styles, and then Kubrick's gone, no, I prefer just the classical.
Oh yeah.
So this is why 2001: Space Odyssey literally just has classical music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I did.
It was the temp music track.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And it's funny how those things just seem so right after the fact.
It is. I would have loved to hear what was written for it, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those things are coming out now. Like I think there's all those re-releases of original material. What about Zappa? His whole catalogue got bought out recently.
Wow.
Yeah, United Music Group.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yep.
So we're gonna
they fucking own everything anyway.
right. So I mean, imagine how much more music we're gonna see and hear there. Yeah.
I think actually somehow in a roundabout way they've even got rights to my music somehow.
Well, I haven't given away my rights yet, so
no, I use like
I've got to make that decision somewhere down the line.
I don't think I'm necessarily giving away any rights, but like they've got distribution rights. I think I use like DistroKid to go on Spotify and
right.
You know, yeah. I don't know how it all works behind the scenes.
Give me what's your spiritual thought lately? Give me one like kernel of where you've been lately with all that stuff.
Okay. What you do in your day to day is your life. This is just the caveat. Some things you do cost a lot of money. Some things don't cost so much money. If you get to enjoy the things that you're doing, the cost of things is completely irrelevant. So yeah, money is just for lifestyle. If you can carve out a lifestyle for yourself, whatever the number is actually doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Having that stuff sorted out is pretty good.
Well, I mean, I spoke to Alf Jackson recently.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's been woofing down on Bruny Island, living at Ulysses' father's place, working on the farm. Well, I think he's got it right.
Yeah, and that's I remember listening to that interview, and that really struck home when I can't remember quite clearly what he said, but it just not quoting him clearly, but he was talking about coming home from Melbourne and then just the kind of reset that he was able to do, and that something about I just felt that. From my take on it was that he was just being completely true to himself and letting all the things fall away that he didn't need.
Exactly.
And that's the hero's journey right there for all of us, I suppose, isn't it? You know.
Indeed.
I was thinking, there's so much conversation in the world, and the language itself is a real hurdle around spiritual stuff, and of course, just talking about spiritual matters can get a bit hairy very quickly.
Sure.
But. I was thinking of all the things I've learned so far. I think comments like self-respect is higher consciousness, so that it's self-respect. And what is my self-respect based on? I mean, we can I can enjoy myself, work hard, and there's definitely a certain kind of confidence and happiness comes from that. But I think in the times of stillness where I'm just resonating with my own gifts, and in silence is like a place where I can really feel the quality of my own self, my own soul, if you like.
Sure.
And it's just that those qualities really, if I'm in connection with them, that's a foundation of my self-respect. It's about returning to it all the time. Each day somehow, and that it's self-respect is a form of higher consciousness. It's not without being pluralistic about it. So self-respect is arrogance, but
no, it's not to be confused with people can sort of jump to the conclusion thinking about associating with an inflated sense of self-importance. Right. That's a completely different thing than respecting yourself. And in point of fact, that old adage to know oneself is to know one's enemy.
Yeah.
By the same token, when you can cultivate gratitude, when you can. Sometimes you might wake up and you're just not fucking feeling it.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But then all you have to say to yourself is, okay, instead of just being completely mad, let's just go give myself 5 minutes and then I'll reassess how I feel in 5 minutes' time. if you still feel just as bad, then definitely have a shower, back to bed, wake up in another hour, have another crack.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, because I think that's what's really changed for me is I think once you've tasted a certain high or a certain higher consciousness around spirituality, it's easy to get obsessed over it. And I think what I've done is really chilled out a lot over the years, and more recently just accept the light and the dark. The fact that it's a real helping to really things that don't fit. There's so many things that don't fit in life, and there's a lot of ambiguity in life, and I think spirituality is really good at dealing with ambiguity, or at the same time, if it's not expressed too well, and someone's like, "What the hell do you mean?"
Just let's disambiguate the word to start with. Spirituality, obviously, there's, for example, you have a lot of different expressions of that. For example, let's say a person might have grown up in a religious household. At the end of the day, they don't like the religion much, but sense of values, sense of identity in terms of the scheme of things, the concept that they have a soul or whatever else. That these ideas might stick with the person. They'll refer to themselves. They'll say, "Oh, look, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual."
Yeah.
And you'll have people who are in, say, New Age type traditions and that sort of thing. They might think of those practices as spiritual.
Yeah.
For a musician, maybe there's no church involved, there's no fucking Bible involved, other than say the Great American Songbook. You know what I mean? But whatever it is that completes someone's soul for that person, whatever, when they're getting that in church, you get that out of and enjoy music.
Yeah.
This religion has been such a huge part of our human history that it would be foolish to think that there's nothing any of value in it at all.
Yeah.
Right. So there's obviously something in it.
Yeah. I always think that all the prophet souls show up and they've got initial power, and that there's power in their understanding, and then what happens is human beings get a hold of it, communities grow. And when a community grows, it becomes dysfunctional by virtue of itself.
Sure.
So it's like the original power of love is the resonance that carries through and remains. But religion's a bunch of tall stories, basically, isn't it? And religion is like 98% behavioural management,
and
2% spirituality. Whereas really, we want to be the other way around.
Well, so back in that turn of the millennium, we needed a religion for just basically to be able to. It was almost like a media outlet in a way.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of major crisis facing the town or whatever, they'll be talking about it in church and form their community groups or whatever else. And then, say, a couple of thousand years later, what we need is, or even 1,000 years later, we need schools.
Yeah.
Schools, what they really exist for? It's not to educate people.
No, that's right.
It's to free up the labour workforce, the parents. You need your populations to be able to work.
Yeah.
They can't do that if they're looking after their kids.
Yeah.
So we create this institution that takes kids out of the house every day.
Last night I took a photo of the 3 books on my bedhead. It's God Is Not Great, and I'm a theist of some description, right? And I love I love Hitch.
Is that Harris? Oh, no, Hitchens.
Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
God Is Not Great. And, what a speaker. And then sandwiched in between that and Satram Sundarham Shivaham, like words from the source about this nature of the immortal self and the makeup of the soul and how
it's like a Theravada text.
It's BK's, so it's like it's Hindi. It's initially spoken in Hindi, but it's it's just very powerful words of illuminating the nature of self, what the makeup of the soul is, what our faculties are, and how I can use it practically in my life, right?
Yeah.
And sandwiched in between those two is Walk Tall, a biography of Cannonball Adderley. So, that's me right there, I think, But love Hitch. I think Christopher Hitchens and the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, like those gentlemen have gone to such lengths to describe, and I think it's what I love so much is the effort.
So for the people at home, the Four Horsemen are Dennett,
Harris, isn't it?
Harris and
Dawkins.
Dawkins.
Yeah. I mean, I just love the energy and the clarity with which they speak, and that they're able to put so much energy into unpacking the dysfunctional side of religion compared to what most people who are behaving in a religious way, it's so disproportionately, I mean, they just put so much effort into trying to understand, and I think it's really special. I just think that the strength of their movement and those ideas, it's really something, because I think for me there's definitely places, there's meeting points between atheistic thought and spirituality. Oh, sure. And it's just that for me, just on one thought, it's just that it's a need to understand, a desire, and to be a desire to understand and to have clarity of thought, not to sort of wipe away illusions,
I had a professor at uni. I did it at philosophy uni, and but he did a thesis on something called HADD, and it's this. So humans have an instinct, a survival instinct. So let's just say we hear a twig crack, and 99 times it's not a lion about to eat us.
Yeah.
Right. But because of the one time it could be a lion, we're alert and worried. Yeah. Okay. So this instinct of ours, which it kind of assumes or prepares the self for dealing with agency. Like you got hit by a rock. Right. We're thinking someone threw that rock. Right. This instinct, the thesis ultimately was just to be very reductive. Why humans will believe in a God, in the sense that there's the 99. There's not God. Yeah. But maybe that one chance that it totally is, and this sense of survival. Yeah. That's why we prefer to believe maybe that there is rather than that there isn't. Yeah. Even though all evidence points to there isn't. Right. But we'll say no, there is, because it's almost like superstition. Like this instinct is almost like a superstition that it might be real. Yeah. And so he wrote his whole thesis about this phenomena and basically explained all of these bizarre behaviours in terms of basic psychological instincts. Yeah. So many impulses that we understand now. But God, she's a good bloke. or dog. What are your thoughts on dog? It's dyslexic. Yeah. So it's been fantastic having you here, Connie. It's always nice to see you. It's
a tremendous expression of your generosity, what you're doing here. I love it.
That's a very nice.
It's been great to be here.
Thank you very much. You got a thought to leave us with?
I don't know. Just for me, what I'm doing now is just trying to have the courage to do the things that support my best self, and have the courage to shed old stuff, but just connect a little bit with the good things, and let that influence my practical life these days.
For sure.
But try not to eat too many Tim Tams. It's holidays coming up. It's like,
send me any spare Tim Tams.
Try not to go down to the Indian sweet shop, which of course I did on the way here.
What are those called? Jub gum? What are those?
Maybe things? Once a month instead of once a week.
You've been great. I'll see you next week.